Hi, Paul. Thank you very much for joining Seekers for Talent. Just want to kick off with a bit more about yourself, really, and your first ever job, and how that led to you becoming Chief Executive of a talent organisation, Investors in People.
Thanks. So my first ever job was a paper round, which I did when I was a young chap. But my first full-time job was I worked in the local social security office in Falkirk, where I grew up. There was a lot of unemployment at the time, so I was just happy to have a job. The really good thing about that was I got employment and I got work experience, but they also put me through college. So I did an HNC in business studies. And then later on, I got a few promotions, and then I got to do a HR graduate diploma, which helped me become chartered CIPD. And then I did the good thing about working in a big organisation like it was now called DWP, but there was lots of opportunities to do different types of jobs. And I was always interested in, people development and how you help people progress. So eventually I did a range of different projects, and then a job came up in the Scottish Prison Service looking for someone to head up their change management OD function. And my first job there was to get the whole of the prison service Investors in People accredited, and that was my first engagement with Investors in People back in 1999. Then to cut a long story short, I went and worked in government for a while on skills policy, helped set up sector skills councils, and while I was in that organisation, they took over Investors in People, and I was lucky enough to get appointed to head it up. I then led on to me leading the buyout of it from the government, set it up as a social enterprise, and 6 years later, we're going strong, and we're making lots of really good progress. So that's my journey in a snapshot.
Well, surely from being from paper round to Chief Executive, there must have been sort of skills and you developing yourself along the way.
Yeah, so it's definitely a mixture of luck and perseverance. So I've always had a growth mindset. I've always been, had an appetite for learning, and I was happy to work and study at night. It took me longer than definitely took me longer than if I had went to university. But I grew up in a council estate. No one in my community went to university straight for school. If you wanted to get on, you needed to get a job and you needed to study outside of working hours, and that was the way that I did it. And I don't regret that. It gave me work experience, and I got the opportunity to learn as well. So it worked. It worked out okay.
So how does that sort of transfer to invest in people? Clearly, obviously, you're using your own experiences and taking that into investing in people. How have you found it being on this side of the table, where you're now going into companies and talking to companies about talent generally?
Yeah. So I'm a great believer in that there is so much untapped talent out there. When I think back of the council estate that I grew up in and compare it to the leafy suburb that I live in now, the people that I grew up with were easily as talented as the people I live in the same community as now. So what I think is brilliant about the Investors in People community is I see every week examples of organisations who have given people amazing life opportunities because they've invested in their people, they've trained them up, they've given them career progression. And that's what I think is brilliant about the Investors in People community, because they all believe that their organisational performance is enhanced by investing in their people. Those people get good, well-paid jobs. They then go and spend that money in their local community, and then the whole economy becomes prosperous. So that's why I'm so passionate about the idea that if we can create as many organisations as we can who believe in investing in people, we'll create a more prosperous and fairer society. And that's what gets you out of bed in the morning.
And how does that work? I mean, how does investing in people work, and how do you sort of measure the companies? How do you measure companies in how they invest in talent?
Yeah, it's dead simple and straightforward. We do the heavy lifting for them. So we do a lot of research into what excellence in people management looks like. And we've got 3 frameworks, as we call them. One around how you invest in your people development, one around well-being, and one around developing apprentices. And in the simplest terms, we research what good practice looks like. we build that into a framework, and it's got progression elements of it. So no matter how well established an organisation is in terms of its practices, we can help them from their starting point and help them progress towards high performance. And the way that we do that is we talk to the staff and ask them what it's like to work there, and we measure that against our framework, and then we support the management team to look at where they can improve, how they can build on their strengths. And if they meet our standard, then they get the benefit of having our accreditation, which helps them with procurement, helps them with attracting new employees. So all of those things combined help make the organisation more productive and help create a better place to work for the employees.
Ultimately, that's what it's down to, isn't it? It comes down to those individuals in terms of and those people within the business and what they feel. And clearly, you must have seen impact. I mean, what has been the impact on talent investment? More importantly, from companies who have taken the IEP accreditation.
Yeah, well, it operates in different levels. So if I think about the individuals that I've met, I've met so many inspiring individuals who lives have been transformed by the fact they went to work for a company who invested in them. It's changed their life chances, given their family a more prosperous future. You look at the organisations, you see the organisation improving their performance all the time, and the organisation achieving its objective and achieving its ambitions. And then when you look at the community and around, the impact that they're having on society, the positive impact that they're having on society, because we know that high-performing organisations are more productive, and the UK has a massive productivity deficit at the moment. So the more high-performing organisations we can help create, the more prosperous the UK becomes as a country.
Do you think there's a fine balance between the types of talent you have and productivity as well?
Yeah, so basically all productivity is how much value does an individual generate in a day's work. And the more skilled and engaged an employee is, the more that they will produce, and therefore that's what drives productivity. So we support organisations to have really good leaders, have a really positive culture, invest in the training and development of their employees. That then helps employee become more productive, their team's more productive, and the organisation more productive overall. So it's a win-win all round.
And you touched on employee engagement. I mean, one of the things I've been doing in terms of my research is looking at employee engagement, and I've noticed that companies are finding it a lot more harder than they have in past because of the nature of work changing. And I'm sure we'll touch on a bit on how that will change soon. But best practices, I mean, you must have seen some best practice out there, particularly from the hundreds and thousands of organisations you're working with, in terms of the ways in which they are investing in talent. It doesn't have to be financial; it can be financial, non-financial. What are some of the ways they are investing in talent?
Yeah, so just go back to your first question about employers struggling with employee engagement, because I think that's a really important point. Since the pandemic, the way that we organise work has been kind of thrown up in the air. And I don't think companies should beat up on themselves too much that they haven't yet got a perfect answer. There are lots of different models out there. There are lots of different, academic papers arguing different ways. I think the key for me is for organisations to engage with their employees, talk to them about, well, what's the best way of organising work that works for you and works for the business, and have a dialogue about that. And then, think creatively. Kind of get that out on a Friday afternoon. Think creatively about, well, how do we find a model that's good for the company and good for the employees? And in my experience, any organisation that has done that has always had a positive outcome. It's not that one particular model is right or wrong, that fully remote is right, or everybody back in the office 9 to 5 is right. Generally, you find it's a kind of hybrid of the two, but those hybrids sit on a really wide continuum, and you need to work out what works for you, for your organisation and for your people. In terms of organisations that really impress me in terms of how they invest in their people, again, that operates at different levels. The good news, which I think is fantastic news, that lots more employers that I'm meeting are really considering apprenticeships now. And I think that is a massive untapped model for building the capability in your organisation. And I have an 18-year-old son who's looking for an apprenticeship, and listening to him and his friends talking, there's a really strong appetite for apprenticeships. And the whole thing about university being the sort of first option that they want to explore is not necessarily the case anymore. So I think that's a real opportunity for employers. And if anyone's on watching this our conversation and thinking about an apprenticeship, it's definitely worth exploring. There's appetite out there for young people to do it, and if an employers can offer good schemes, they'll get inundated with really high quality applications. So that's one area. And I think the other area is, if you think again about the future of work, the really progressive employers at the moment are really thinking carefully about, well, what does work look like in the future? What impact is AI and ChatGPT and all of these things going to have? And how do you create a dynamic and flexible workforce that is going to succeed no matter what changes the world might throw at us in the years to come? And the truth is, none of us really know what the future holds. So therefore, it's even more important that you build the skills and capability of your workforce to be able to deal with whatever opportunities may present itself. And that for me is the absolute key to success, because there's going to continue to be labour shortages. We've got more people leaving the labour market than entering it. So how you train and develop your staff and engage them and encourage them to be retained by you is going to be a big determinant in whether your organisation has a sustainable future.
You mentioned something quite interesting, actually, which is something of interest to myself as well, which is AI.
Yeah.
Do you think that could be a barrier to accessing talent, in terms of, if everything becomes much more easy to do yourself, then the number of talent that you would need, or the types of talent you would need, would reduce? Or could it be an opportunity in upskilling and creating new avenues of talent?
I think it's exactly the same opportunity and risk that the internet provided. It could be a force for incredible good, but in the wrong hands, it could be used destructively as well. So, and that's all of that's still up for grabs. And it's inevitable that it's coming, and we need to work with it. There's no point sticking your head in the sand and then pretend it's going to go away. It's not. It's only going to become more sophisticated and more powerful. So we need to think about how we use it as a tool for good, and how do we use it to enrich jobs and make people more productive. Inevitably, it might replace jobs, but more often than not, these technologies create new opportunities and new jobs that we haven't even thought about yet. And hopefully that's the case going forward. But if we are going to have less people available in the labour market, and we do want to increase productivity, then it should be a positive if it's done properly, because we can use it to enhance the productivity of employees and make us all, hopefully all, more wealthy and more prosperous. So that's my hope for it. But, in terms of how it'll all turn out, I don't think anybody can claim to know that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Final question, Paul, on future work, and you touched on remote work and how that's sort of changing. But what do you think the future work holds for talent?
Yeah. So for talent, I think we all, and this is not a new phrase, but I think it's more relevant than ever, that learning is a lifetime occupation. The world is going to change so quickly and so fast. We will need to have the capacity for learning and adapting in a way that we thought we needed that more in the last 10 years. I think that's going to grow exponentially. So we're going to have to continually invest in ourselves, and employers to invest in their employees. That's a given, because the world is going to change so quickly that skills will quickly go out of date if you don't keep up. So therefore, we need to think what are the core skills that we can equip people with that's going to mean that they've got the flexibility to adapt to whatever's coming. And digital inevitably is going to be a big part of that. And I think what you'll see more and more As employers come to terms with the fact that the supply of the kind of labour that they want is more and more finite, that they need to invest more in capital, and invest more in automation and enrich the jobs of the people that they've got. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future too.
Paul, it's been a fruitful conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks for asking me.